Happy holidays, everybody. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you're having a Merry Christmas. And if you don't celebrate it, I hope you're having a good whatever day today is for you. So, I took a week off on the channel after finishing up Doom Eternal and having a nice 4-hour stream with you guys about that very same game. As I was finishing up that review, I was thinking on how much I love the franchise and my disappointment and how I really dislike my previous Doom reviews. Doom 2016 was on a previous mic with bad audio quality, Dooms 1, 2, and 3 I was talking way too fast like an auctioneer, and I wasn't feeling that well when I made my review of Doom 64, the sound of my voice really reflecting that. I wanted to revisit and re-review them. Instead of making 5 entirely new videos and spamming the channel with Doom, Doom, and more Doom, on this Christmas Day of 2020, here is my review of the Doom franchise for the Nintendo Switch. Before we really get started here, let's make a couple things clear. I re-recorded all of the audio for this video, none of it was taken from my previous reviews. I also won't be putting any battery readings here. It's already going to be extremely long as is, so I figured let's not make it longer than it has to be. Here is a table of contents with timestamps for each game in case you want to look at my coverage of a specific one and not all of them. Alright, you've had a moment to take a look at that, so let's get started. Doom 93 and Doom 2 are the start of the series, although they were the middle releases when it comes to the Nintendo Switch. As far as the story goes, Doom 1 has you, the Doom Marine, fighting off a hellish invasion on the moons of Mars, going to hell itself to be able to save humanity from, well, hell. Going through the extra episode and into Doom 2, you finally make your way back to Earth only to find it under a demonic invasion as well, going right back into the fight to save humanity. Despite all of the story I just told you, the classic Doom games are very light on plot. You basically go through an entire episode of stages and get a little wall of text to actually tell you what's going on. Now, when it comes to gameplay, these are first-person shooters with a lot of exploration and puzzles. These versions of Doom 93 and Doom 2 also have some unique content and a lot of improvements since I originally reviewed them at launch. Many of you probably remember the Bethesda.net login fiasco where you couldn't access these games at all offline. You had to log in with a Bethesda account and be connected to the internet to play. This has since been patched and you no longer need to log in nor be online to be able to play either of these games. We've also got a lot of new content and campaigns added to both games in the form of add-ons. All of these are completely free to download to your game and launch and are WAD files, something old school Doom fans should recognize. Many of these campaigns are available for both Dooms 1 and 2, which include Double Impact, BTSX Episodes 1 and 2, Wrecker, the recently added Doom 0 just released in mid-December 2020, and both campaigns for the standalone game Final Doom. These games also have exclusive WADs, with Sigil, Deathless, and No End in Sight available for Doom 93, along with No Rest for the Living available for Doom 2, something that was oddly missing at launch, completing that Doom 2 experience. This is a huge amount of improvement, though it is worth noting that the multiplayer for these games is still local only. There is no way to play online with other players. Now, when we get to the main gameplay loop, Dooms 1 and 2 play in maze-like stages with enemies to fight along with keys that you have to explore around to find to open doors and get to the end of the stage. These games, and well, the entire series, has always had an emphasis on secret areas that you can roam around and find, giving you early access to weapons, special power-ups, or just the knowledge that you found all of the secrets. The fast-paced nature of this along with the hordes that you fight made this a really entertaining experience, that faster pace also helping with playing the games today to not feel as dated as they are, with you having to constantly sprint and scramble around for ammo just like you have to do in the new games. These are also great when it comes to content and length. Doom 93 and Doom 2 only cost $5 a piece. The main campaigns are going to take you about 4 to 5 hours to complete, but if you add all of those add-ons you can download, you're gonna be busy for dozens upon dozens of hours. And considering Doom Zero just launched about a week or two ago, we're probably gonna get more in the future. Now, let's move on to presentation, where we've got some more improvements. The visuals of these games were pretty decently ported. You've got some small jaggies here and there, but not really anything major. The only other problems I had with presentation have since been fixed. The odd borders on the left and right hand sides of the screen have been fixed with an update allowing you to go into settings to change the aspect ratio and bring these up to a full screen experience. The lower frame rate that I didn't really have a problem with before has also been elevated, so it is constantly at a buttery smooth 60 FPS. So as we conclude our first section, Doom 93 and Doom 2 were flawed ports at launch with FPS, borders, and Bethesda.net issues, all of which have been fixed now, leaving the games only with the downside of multiplayer being restricted to local only. Because of these enhancements, my original 8 out of 10 score has easily bumped up to a 9.5 out of 10. So when it comes to story, Doom 3 is a bit interesting as it is a kind of a standalone thing while all of the other games are connected. In Doom 3, you are a Marine sent to a Mars base that gets attacked and taken over by an invasion of hell. You have to fight through possessed soldiers that you were talking to minutes before, along with the demons that have invaded. The thing the Doom 3 story does so well is lore building and context. Instead of the wall of text that you had with the classic games, you got actual cinematic cutscenes and tons of video and audio files you can find around the game through PDAs that you can literally listen to like little podcasts that tell you each person's story and helps you piece together the puzzle of what's actually going on here. Unlike the games we just talked about, instead of being an FPS with exploration elements, Doom 3 is an FPS with exploration and horror elements thrown into the mix. This version of Doom 3 is based off of BFG Edition. It's got the base game with the 2 DLC expansions, Resurrection of Evil and Lost Mission. It also has some quality of life changes, with the flashlight being a button instead of a weapon you have to swap your gun out for. And as I mentioned in my original review, autosave can now be disabled, so that annoying little pop-up that broke the scary game immersion no longer breaks that scary game immersion. Now what you'll be doing here isn't that different from the other Doom games. You're still exploring a bunch of areas, fighting off enemies with your firearms and looking for secrets. But all of the areas you're looking in are now very dark, with enemies hiding and teleporting around corners to try to scare you. Although the combat pacing is significantly slower than the previous games, the emphasis on looking for secrets is still here. As I just mentioned a moment ago, the game is really good at showing you context and lore through the audio and video logs, so I was constantly going out of my way to try to find more PDAs so I could get more of that sweet and juicy story context. Thankfully, the different system and feel of the pacing is matched by the different types of firearms you have to choose from. Many of them are returning, but they feel very different, which kind of gives Doom 3 an identity all of its own. And as that comes together, we do still have a good amount of content and length. Doom 3 for the Nintendo Switch costs $10, and it'll take you about 8 to 10 hours to go through the base campaign, and you can easily double that for the DLC added in. Moving on to presentation, the visuals look pretty good with some nice and smooth renders on pretty much everything. We've got a silky smooth 60 frames per second for performance, though the rooms with a lot of frame drops back at launch still have all of those frame drops that easily go into the 20s and below. So, in conclusion of this game, it's a tad bit more expensive than the classics, but Doom 3 retains its dark atmosphere and a great way of providing context and story audibly with its audio logs on the go. Unfortunately, the FPS drops still haven't been patched, so my 9 out of 10 score from back then is still a 9 out of 10. When it comes to story, Doom 64 has the Doom Marine after Doom 2 tasked with going after the forces of hell once again. Now, the story is pretty light here, just like the classics. Wall of texts after each episode, not really giving you a lot of cinematic stuff. But one thing Doom 64 does really well in this little remaster is the new chapter, The Lost Levels. This has a new little story bit right at the end that links Doom 64 and in turn Dooms 1 and 2 with the newer games Doom 2016 and Eternal, bringing almost all of the games together in a single continuity. When it comes to gameplay, 64 isn't that different from Dooms 1 and 2. It's a first-person shooter with exploration through maze-like stages with puzzle elements. And like Dooms 1 and 2, it has some unique features like a cheat menu via passwords. We've also got brightness and field of view settings to fix the original problem with 64 being too dark, achievements that unlock like PlayStation and Xbox trophies. And of course, the Lost Levels campaign, the new story bit that bridges the old games with the new. When we get to main progression though, there's a lot that's familiar. You've got the same maze-like stages with a lot of exploration, secrets, and tons of shooting at wave upon wave of demons. The part about this that sets 64 apart outside of the aesthetic are the level design and enemy placement, making hordes bigger and more difficult than those early classic games, and the Unmaker, a new weapon that utilized a weapon upgrade system, a shooter feature that was way ahead of its time. This is a fun system though. The Lost Levels does feel a bit repetitive as its main antagonist is basically just an asset reuse of the same final boss from Doom 64's main campaign. Regardless, we do have a good amount of content and length, definitely the lowest amount of all of the games we've covered in this video so far. But Doom 64 costs $5 or you get it for free when you purchase Doom Eternal for the Nintendo Switch, and the main campaign in Lost Levels should take you at least 8 to 10 hours to trek through. When it comes to presentation, there really isn't much to complain about. The visuals look very nice and smooth, though I will admit it looks better if you take the smoothing filter and turn it off. With performance, we've got a nice and constant 60 frames per second, though this was the case at launch as well. So as we conclude this one, Doom 64 uses the same formula as the original games but ramps up the difficulty with the design and a new chapter that links all of the games together. While the reused boss assets in the new campaign is a bit disappointing, it's still a fun Doom game with a bit of a different look than the other classics. There's not really anything different here, so my 8.5 out of 10 score is still an 8.5 out of 10. As we dive into story here, we get to the new games of the franchise. Doom 2016 has you waking up on a Mars facility as the Doomslayer, someone excavated from Mars, having to fight against the forces of hell to repel them. This is a similar setup to Doom 3 as far as the environment, but you're being guided by a cyborg named Dr. Hayden, who's trying to use Hell's energy for Earth's benefit. Doom 2016 has a ton of lore and context with all of the codex entries you can find, and has lots of subtle little hints at possible connections to the older games, which we now know came to fruition with Doom 64 and Doom Eternal. When it comes to gameplay, Doom 2016 is a first-person shooter with exploration and upgrade elements thrown into the mix. So the Nintendo Switch version of Doom 2016 doesn't have everything here. We've got the base game in multiplayer, though the Snap Map level creator has been removed for the Nintendo Switch release. Progression here is really the same kind of formula as the older games, despite this being a quote-unquote reboot. You've got large levels with enemy waves to fight and secrets to find via exploration. The big difference here are modern features that have been thrown in, with weapon and armor upgrades, and the cinematic glory kill system that gives you all of those gory close-up kills that feel oh so satisfying. There's also a lot of different kinds of secrets here outside of just early access to weapons. Like the rune trials you can unlock cheats with, upgrades for your stats as well as your weapons and armor, and classic Doom maps letting you fight in those old Doom 1 and 2 levels but seeing all of the new enemies. Speaking of, all of the enemies in this game are bulky and very fast, making combat extremely fast-paced and hectic, even faster than in the original games. It really makes for a fun system, and you've got plenty of content and length here as well. Doom 2016 costs about $60, and you're going to be spending somewhere between 12 and 20 hours on the story mode, depending on what difficulty you choose and how much extra stuff you want to go back and find. Now let's dive into presentation, because the visuals are detailed but with a fairly strong blur factor. This was a very ambitious game, even though Eternal is even more so, and something that people thought handheld consoles could never run on. Despite the strong blur, the game stays at a pretty nice and smooth 30 frames per second for most of the game, dropping into the 20s only in some really hectic areas in the final level. The main downside of the presentation outside of the very heavy motion blur is the UI being blurry along with the graphics. This makes all of the codex entries that gives you all of that sweet lore very difficult to read even in docked mode. Bringing Doom 2016 to a conclusion, this game brought the classic progression style and updated it with modern features for modern gamers. Now on the downside, the Switch version's motion blur is very heavy, and Snap Map being gone is a bit of a bummer. But regardless of its faults, it is a technical achievement that it runs as well as it does. It's not really any different now than it was before, so my 8 out of 10 is still an 8 out of 10. And here we are. All of it comes down to this. As far as story goes, Doom Eternal takes place 8 months after Doom 2016, where hell has completely invaded and overwhelmed planet Earth, with the Doom Slayer arriving to save humanity once again. Now, Eternal is a great addition and expansion to the series' lore because there is a huge story focus with new species and characters showing up, and it did a ton to expand and connect the series together in one continuity, save for Doom 3, which seems to still be in its little corner doing its own thing. Now when it comes to gameplay, this is yet again a first-person shooter with exploration and upgrade elements. Unlike Doom 2016, all content is intact here with the single player and multiplayer in the Switch version. The DLC is missing for now, but Bethesda did confirm it will be coming later. The big difference you'll notice right away between 2016 and Eternal is that you've got a big spaceship hub that you go to between missions that has a lot of stuff that you can do to explore it, with unlocking upgrades and costumes, seeing extra little story bits, and a few other things you unlock as you progress the game. When you get into missions, you'll notice that Eternal basically took everything that 2016 set it up and made it bigger and better. Stages are absolutely enormous, with lots more areas and secrets, giving you more tools to be able to explore them with fast travel, climbing, and platforming around like Spider-Man. It also brought back a lot more enemies that Doom 2016 didn't, along with new features. Ammo drops in the plasma rifle giving a much more retro feel, an enhanced glory kill and chainsaw system giving you access to ammo refills without necessarily having to find them littered on the ground. And the sheer number of big enemies coming at you all at once ramps up the difficulty to an entirely new level, easily making Eternal one of the fastest and most difficult games of the series. Though with as much fun as all of the chaos is, the sheer number of "you're trapped in a room with waves of enemies so fight them until it's over" battles the game gives you gets really repetitive over time with how many there are and how long they take. Though just like the other games, Eternal gives us a lot of content and length. The game costs $60 and it took me about 20 hours to be able to finish up the story mode from start to finish. Getting to presentation, we get to another technical marvel by Panic Button. The game is very visually detailed with a pretty strong blur like Doom 2016, though without that really heavy motion blur. The UI has also been improved, giving us codex entries that can be read very clearly in both docked and handheld modes instead of being very blurred. Performance has also improved as the entire game runs at a beautiful 30 frames per second in docked and handheld mode from start to finish. None of those drops like we saw in Doom 2016 outside of cinematics and handheld mode, where it won't even cause a problem. So as we wrap things up with Eternal, this game takes everything the reboot was and made it bigger and better than before. The blur is definitely a thing, especially in handheld mode, and the trapped battles can get repetitive. But Doom Eternal running this smoothly without FPS drops on the Nintendo Switch is a technical marvel and masterpiece that Panic Button should receive huge props for. And obviously, since I just reviewed the game a week ago, my 8 out of 10 is still an 8 out of 10. Now let's take a look at everything we've got for the entire series. Doom 93 and Doom 2 got a 9.5, Doom 3 got a 9, Doom 64 an 8.5, and both Doom 2016 and Eternal got 8s. Now let's go to our average. I am rating the Doom franchise for the Nintendo Switch an 8.6 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching through this special little Christmas video I made for you. As always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and have a good holiday.